Thank you, Joe. Am I still on? Good morning. My name's Tom. If we've not met, I'm one of the leaders here. If you stopped somebody on the street and asked, where do you go if you want to meet with God? What do you think they'd say? Find a church building? Go out for a nice walk in nature? Maybe somebody would say, nowhere. I don't think he's actually there. Exodus 19 is one of those passages in the Bible that shouts, the living God does meet with people. He comes down. He speaks. But as we're about to see, this isn't casual. It's wonderful and also a bit terrifying. And in the end, it raises a really massive question for us. How can ordinary people like us ever stand in the presence of a God like this? That's what our passage is about this morning. And we've got lots to cover, so I'd like to invite Evelyn to come up and read the first section for us.
Okay, Exodus chapter 19. On the first day of the third month after the Israelites left Egypt, on that very day, they came to the desert of Sinai. After they set out from Rephidim, they entered the desert of Sinai, and Israel camped there in the desert in front of the mountain. Then Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain and said, "This is what you are to say to the descendants of Jacob, and what you are to tell the people of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. That these are the words you are to speak to the Israelites." So Moses went back and summoned to the elders of the people and said before them all the words the Lord had commanded him to speak. The people all responded together, "We will do everything the Lord has said." So Moses brought their answer back to the Lord.
Thanks, Evelyn. Well, there's quite a lot going on already in this passage, isn't there? We've got a time update to start, noting to the day exactly how long it's been since the Israelites left Egypt. But the author is keeping our attention on the desert experience of the Israelites. Not just the dramatic escape from Egypt, but the anticlimax of wandering around for weeks in the desert, looking for food, looking for water. And then they arrive at the foot of Mount Sinai. It's worth saying that this is a point in the narrative where everything slows down dramatically. To put things in perspective, the Israelites set up camp at the foot of Mount Sinai, and they stay put for the next 59 chapters of the Bible. Chronologically speaking, they're there for the next 10 months. This is a significant moment in the life of the people of Israel. Their relationship with God is going to transform in a profound way, and it begins with a revelation. A revelation. Look at verse 3. Moses goes to the mountain, and God gives him a message to relay to the people of Israel. It's a message specifically for them, which we just heard read out. And at this point, I want to underscore something that Ian said in his talk last week. Whatever else is happening in this passage, it's demonstrating two things. One, God is forming a people, and two, God is making his name known. This plays out in several ways in what the Lord tells Moses. It starts with a reminder. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. The Lord starts by appealing to very recent history, what the Israelites should know intuitively, but have demonstrably forgotten in their relatively short time wandering in the wilderness. We saw this a few weeks ago when they were testing God to try and get water, having only that morning eaten miraculously provided quail and manna. I think Matt called it unbelievable unbelief. Incidentally, don't get caught up on the on eagle's wings bit. Those of us who are a certain age remember The Rescuers Down Under, classic, poorly regarded Disney, or with fondness, or perhaps Lord of the Rings has some gigantic birds swooping in and saving the day. Is that what this is talking about? No, it's a metaphor. As unlikely as it would be for a bird of prey to swoop in and carry someone to safety, that's exactly how unlikely it would be for the Israelites to be freed from bondage. And notice verse 5 shifts the tone a little bit. It moves from remembrance to conditional language. Conditional language. He writes, "If you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of the nations you will be my treasured possession." How does that strike you? Does it sound like maybe a recipe for legalism? A life of perpetually never knowing whether you've done enough, whether you're in or out with someone? In a vacuum, yeah, it could look like that. But we can't forget the verse before it, which is in effect summarizing the whole book before it. They've already been delivered. They aren't going to be saved and delivered by God on the basis of how well they follow his commands. They've already been saved and delivered for no other reason than they are his people who he loves. Have you ever been caught up in a sort of legalistic spiral? Thoughts like, I must not be good enough for God if the standard is perfection, so I might as well not bother with this whole Christianity thing. Look at this passage. Deliverance happens before obedience. Notice that the Lord doesn't leave it there. He carries on to say that his people will be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Does this mean that everyone's going to walk around in priestly garments blessing everyone? No, that's not what I think the Lord's getting at here. First of all, notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't say that they will be the mightiest of nations with a fully kitted out army who are going to strike fear into the hearts of their enemies when they turn up. He doesn't say that they'll be a wealthy nation, covering everything they've got in gold and demonstrating their significance in a financial way. No, he zeroes in on kingdom of priests and holy nation. Several scholars writing on Exodus have shown how this is actually a clever turn on Moses' part to echo God's original purpose for humanity in the Garden of Eden. Bible scholar Desmond Alexander points out that kingdom of priests and holy nation is really God beginning to restore what was lost in Eden. Adam and Eve had direct access to God's presence and were commissioned to rule the world under him, and they lost that through disobedience. Here at Sinai, God is effectively saying to Israel, by walking in covenant faithfulness, you will begin to recover my original purpose for humanity. Now, I've also got this language of a holy nation. I think this is an expansion of the same idea. The word holy in the Bible carries lots of different connotations nowadays, but maybe the best definition we could use is holiness meaning set apart. The people of Israel are set apart, not as superior, but as distinctively belonging to God. What's intended here is that their life in community, their worship, their upholding of righteousness, justice, and equity in the application of their laws, this is all intended to model and to reveal God to the nations around them. This people has a purpose. And this is the exact language that's picked up later on in the Bible in 1 Peter 2:9. Peter, remember, is one of Jesus' inner circle. He's writing to a bunch of ordinary, ethnically diverse, probably struggling Christians, and he calls them back to this scene. He says, "You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, God's special possession." That's the language he uses. The identity introduced at Mount Sinai is fulfilled in Jesus, not just for Israel, but for all who respond to Jesus' invitation. Come back to that in a little bit. One more thing to highlight here, because it's really important. The sort of language the Lord is using here, it's the language of a covenant. Now, you might have in mind a covenant being a sort of dry legal contract. I'm exchanging 3 sheep for a 1997 Nissan, something like that. Probably not. I don't think it's worth 3 sheep. Covenants in the Bible are far more personal. They're often intensely relational. Marriage is probably the best example. 2 people publicly bind themselves together, giving themselves over to the other fully, an expression of complete trust and loyalty. This is the kind of language that comes across when God talks about rescuing his people, carrying them on eagle's wings, and binding himself to them in love. And like I said before, notice the order. The covenant doesn't begin with commands. Do this, and I'll love you. It begins with grace. Before God asks anything from Israel, he reminds them of the profound love he's already demonstrated. When he invites them to keep my covenant, he's not saying, earn my love. He's actually saying, live out the identity I've already given you. That's where this idea of a holy nation takes shape. They're meant to reflect God's character, the light of God's character in a dark world. And incidentally, this isn't something new. We saw how this was connected to Adam and Eve in the garden. It's also directly tied to Abraham. What does he say to Abraham? I will be your God, and you will be my people. But now it's not just a little family in a backwater town, it's a whole nation. And now the Lord tells his people how to prepare for his presence. And I'm going to invite Evelyn back up, and we're going to read verses 9 to 15.
Exodus 19, 9 to 15. The Lord said to Moses, I am going to come to you in a dense cloud, so that the people will hear me speaking with you and will always put their trust in you. Then Moses told the Lord what the people had said. And the Lord said to Moses, come to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow. Have them wash their clothes and be ready by the 3rd day, because on that day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of the people. Put limits for all the people around the mountain and tell them, be careful that you do not approach the mountain or touch the foot of it. Whoever touches the mountain is to be put to death. They are to be stoned or shot with arrows. Not a hand is to be laid on them. No person or animal shall be permitted to live. Only when the ram's horn sounds a long blast may they approach the mountain. After Moses had gone down the mountain to the people, he consecrated them, and they washed their clothes. Then he said to the people, prepare yourselves for the 3rd day. Abstain from sexual relations.
Thanks, Evelyn. You can think of this as a sort of formal announcement of a visit that will change everything. If we look at the ways in which the Hebrew Bible talks about God's presence, one of the most consistent things is that it's not just impressive, but it's downright intimidating. It really drives home the idea that the most frequent command in the Bible, does anyone know what the most frequent command in the Bible is? Don't be afraid. Yeah. That this needs to be said so frequently should suggest to us the enormity of what's entailed with coming into God's presence. But notice why God is setting out to be present at Sinai in this way. The back half of verse 9, he says that this is so that people will hear me speaking with you and will always put their trust in you. In other words, he's coming down to this mountain at this time. The The Lord himself will be guaranteeing that what Moses says about him is the true and right account. But at this point, we need to probably address the proverbial elephant in the room. One does not simply walk into the Lord's presence. What I mean here is that there's some preparation involved. Has anybody been in the presence of royalty? Anybody? A few? Yeah, a couple here and there. I have. It was kind of a wild experience. I was a student at Edinburgh University at the time when Princess Anne came by for a visit. This wasn't just a drop-in. We all received emails weeks before. They started painting all the corridors to make it look nicer than it did. The emails we got informed us of the standard protocol that we needed to follow. They told us there'd be extra security around, and while there wasn't a specific ban on wearing dinosaur t-shirts, it definitely felt implied. The list was fairly long. The royal approaches you, not the other way around. It's Your Royal Highness, followed by ma'am, as in jam. Don't try to take selfies with the princess, and so on and so on. Now, if these sorts of preparations go out for a human monarch, imagine how much more significant it must be to come into the presence of God, the creator and sustainer of all things. And it's worth noting that this is one of only a few points in this part of the Bible where God effectively says, stand back, I'm coming in person. It's both incredible and perhaps a touch intimidating. Now, the instructions he gives are pretty straightforward, if perhaps somewhat quirky in our modern eyes. Have a wash. Don't approach the mountain uninvited. Why these things? Is God recoiling at the sight of dirty laundry? No. In the culture, particularly where time and indeed water were precious commodities, it was a sign of the utmost respect to intentionally and specifically wash all your clothes. This underscored all the more by the reality that they're in the middle of a desert. So presumably either this washing happened with the limited supply of water they were carrying with them, or hundreds of thousands of people had to take turns washing in the little stream nearby. Either way, it makes sense that it takes several days to get everyone ready. And what's this about not approaching the mountain? Why go to the extent of threatening capital punishment for those who don't take the command seriously? I think we need to unpack a bit more about the nature of God's holiness here. The illustration I thought of is, think of it a bit like the sun. The sun gives life to everything on earth. It's essential to our existence and our survival, but we can't just walk up to it. If you tried, you'd have a pretty bad experience. It's actually so powerful you can't stare at it directly. It's so powerful you need to slather yourself in goo so that it doesn't cook you when you go to the beach. The sun is blazing. It's brilliant. It's powerful. It invokes awe, but it's powerful at a level that we can't possibly fathom, let alone experience unfiltered. God is here saying that at his holy mountain, approaching his presence is by invitation only. This isn't God being difficult. It's God demonstrating his holiness. His holiness is life-giving, and yet, if approached wrongly, could be lethal at the same time. So they do what the Lord says. They wash up their clothes, they stay away from the mountain. Verse 15 also notes they abstain from sex. Does this mean that sex is somehow ungodly? Absolutely not. God created sex, after all. I think it's more helpful to think of this as one part of a wider preparation for something special, something different in the life of every Israelite person. The commentator Douglas Stewart has a helpful passage on this. He writes, "Does this verse imply that having sex is evil? Not at all. Rather, it asserts that there are special occasions of prayerful preparation and worshipful activity that call for an avoidance of the usual, non-sinful personal indulgences and demand special, focused, self-denying attention to God." So this isn't God inflicting some prudish attitude towards sex and sexuality in his people. Think of it a bit more like fasting. At various times in the Bible, God's people are instructed to take a short break from their regular routine. And there are moments in your life where you will say, this thing deserves my full, uninterrupted attention. This is one of those moments. So for 2 days, the people wash, they wait, they abstain, and they stay back from the mountain. Every ordinary part of life is put on pause. Distractions are removed. The camp gets quiet. There's a stillness. There's a sense of anticipation before the presence of God arrives. And then, on the morning of the third day, the quiet of the preparation is utterly shattered. There's thunder, there's lightning, there's smoke, a whole mountain shaking. Sound like a trumpet blast from heaven. The God who reveals himself in words is about to reveal himself in fire. Let's listen to what happens.
Exodus chapter 19, 16 to 25. On the morning of the third day, there was thunder and lightning, with a thick cloud over the mountain, and a very loud trumpet blast. Everyone in the camp trembled. When Moses led the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain, Mount Sinai was covered with smoke, because the Lord descended on it in fire. The smoke billowed up from it like smoke from a furnace, and the whole mountain trembled violently. As the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and the voice of God answered him. The Lord descended to the top of Mount Sinai and called Moses to the top of the mountain. So Moses went up, and the Lord said to him, "Go down and warn the people so they do not force their way through to see the Lord, and many of them perish. Even the priests who approach the Lord must consecrate themselves, or the Lord will break out against them." Moses said to the Lord, "The people cannot come up Mount Sinai, because you yourself warned us. Put limits around the mountain and set it apart as holy." The Lord replied, "Go down and bring Aaron up with you. But the priests and the people must not force their way through to come up to the Lord, or he will break out against them." So Moses went down to the people and told them.
Thank you, Evelyn. I think these chapter-long talks are really a lot of extra work for our Bible readers. Thank you so much. Well, in a sense, this is the moment that our whole time in Exodus has been building up to. The Lord has remembered his people, he's delivered his people, and now he's coming to be with his people. We had revelation, we had preparation, now it's time for manifestation, the Lord's presence near his people. And look at the language that the chapter uses. Thunder and lightning, thick cloud over the mountain, a loud trumpet blast. The whole mountain shakes as God descends to meet Moses. It's not a gentle, ephemeral spiritual encounter. It's terrifying and it's wonderful all at once, because this is not just the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is the creator of everything, breaking into the physical world in holiness and majesty. We see creation itself responding to his presence. And then notice what happens. God calls Moses back up the mountain, but there's a warning. He says, "Warn the people so they do not force their way through to see the Lord, and many of them perish." Even now, after 2 days of washing, consecrating, abstaining, waiting, the people can't come closer. There's a boundary in place. The mediator, Moses, goes up, but the people have to stay back. This is a huge moment in the storyline of the Bible. God is drawing near, but full access to his presence is not yet possible. We've seen revelation, there's been preparation. We're actively seeing the manifestation of God's physical presence. But a physical distance remains. So Moses obeys. He goes up the mountain, the Israelites stay back. God is about to reveal the 10 Commandments, the law that will shape Israel's life, identity, worship, justice, and relationships for centuries. And it's a cliffhanger. You can feel the story holding its breath, waiting for what's to come. And I'm afraid you're going to have to wait till we pick this up in the new year. But before we go, we need to recognize what this scene at the foot of Mount Sinai was preparing us for. Because it's not just an ancient story. It's a preview of a greater mountain, a greater revelation, a greater manifestation of God's presence with his people, and that comes through another mediator. You see, the writer to the book of to the Hebrews says this. He writes that Christians in the decade after Jesus' death, he says, "You have not come to a mountain that can be touched and that is burning with fire, to darkness, gloom, and storm." And look where he goes with it. "You've come to Mount Zion, to the heavenly Jerusalem, to God, the judge of all, to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant." And this is a game changer. God descended on Sinai in fire, but he's come even closer to us, not in a mountain, but in a person, Jesus. It's Jesus who will be the final mediator between God and humanity. But there are some key differences here. This mediator doesn't need to go up and down the mountain again and again. He's in perfect relationship with his Father. His suffering rips apart the final boundary between God and his people. He's a mediator who brings us joy and wholeness rather than fear. Sinai shows us the holiness of God. Calvary, where Jesus died, shows us the way to full relationship with God. At Sinai, the people said, "Don't let God speak to us or we'll die." At Calvary, we have the Savior who said, "Come unto me and I'll give you rest." At Sinai, the people washed their clothes. At Calvary, Jesus washes their whole selves, their hearts, their consciences, their guilt. At Sinai, the people had to stay back. But at Calvary, Jesus made a way once and for all for his people to draw near to God. Is this your hope? Is this your identity, not in your accomplishments, your education, your bank balance, but in Jesus who came to put you right with God forever? I hope it is. If not, and you'd like to talk about it, please talk to one of us who's been up at the front. We'd love to speak with you. And as the musicians come up, I'm going to end by saying that Hebrews 12 goes on to say, "Since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful and so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe." In other words, when you see the God of Sinai and the grace of Jesus together, the right response is grateful, reverent worship. So let's sing about this new identity we have in Jesus and what it means for us.
Let's stand together.
That the highest King would welcome me. I was lost, but he brought me in. Oh, his love for me. Oh, his love for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free. Child of God, yes I am. Free at last, he has run. place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am.
Please be seated.
Thank you so much. What we're going to do now is just take a few minutes to have a look at some of the questions you guys have been putting in. There are currently just a couple, so if anyone wants to sneak a late killer question in, do feel free. But Tom, come and join me. So, Tom, here we go. Get up. Why is that warning to keep out repeated and repeated? Why do we get so many verses about stop?
It's almost as if God's people tend to forget or to be disobedient or to say, actually, did God really say that? I think I can do it. It underscores the seriousness of God's presence and what that implies for humans who can't handle God's presence would be my, yeah.
Thank you. Next question. Verse 3, God's already on the mountain. Why do we then get the whole, then he comes and the trumpets and the volcano and stuff? He's already there.
Yeah, well, in a sense, God's kind of everywhere, isn't he? How do we look at this? I think one way of saying it is when we hear these things before, it's often the voice of the Lord. The Hebrew Bible talks about the voice of the Lord coming to people. Is this something that only they can hear? Moses has previously seen a burning bush, but again, that's just God doing a sign rather than God's presence. This is clearly, I think, being signposted in several different ways to show that this is something that's unprecedented, the presence of God with his people, something we haven't actually seen since the beginning when God was creating the world. And I think that's why the creation responds to it. The creation recognizes its creator to some extent. So, yes, God is technically on the mountain. Moses is conversing with God throughout this whole narrative, but it's pointing towards something very different, something really special.
Thank you. So we asked for more questions and they've all come. We're not going to get to all of these. Tom, quickly, is it appropriate to wear a dinosaur t-shirt when sharing God's word?
I think
Yes.
so. Yeah.
Right, there we go. Dealt with that one.
Sure.
Okay, here we go. This one's interesting. Read it carefully. When the Bible says, be holy because I, the Lord, am holy, in what aspects does it apply? How are we to be holy like God? Presumably it doesn't mean I can't come near you, Tom, because you're burning with fire and have trumpets.
Yes, I should be so like the sun that you run away from me. No, I think what it means is this idea of being set apart, of consecrated, so that the choices I make in my life recognize that I'm not my own. I'm not just me. I'm not just doing things that I like to do, but actually I'm set apart. My mind is set apart. My body is set apart. The aspects of my life that make me me need to be set apart. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that, Joe?
Yeah, what you said. Okay. Why couldn't the people go up the mountain? How are we to trust just one person that God appeared to him and spoke to him? Did Moses make it all up? And why did God pick Moses?
So God picks Moses because he's God's man for the job early on. In terms of being the mediator, I think it's interesting that this actually shows something different. The Israelites have grumbled in the past. There's been a lot of back and forth, like, Moses. They yell at him. They say, we would be better off in Egypt. Here, part of God coming down is that it appears that they can audibly hear what God is saying to Moses. So there's no question now of what's going on. In a sense, Moses isn't special. He's not like superhuman or anything like that. He's just a guy. He makes mistakes. But I think he's one in a series of mediators between God's people and God that culminates and is eclipsed in Jesus, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think we might get through all the questions. Just don't put any more on. Can you share a moment when you've come to experience God's holiness?
For me, I would say communion is often a place where there's a special moment of reflection in the presence of God, but also in his people, where You feel like the kind of boundaries between heaven and earth get a little bit thin. I don't know how to describe that well. I'm not describing it well, but for me, I think that's a point where I frequently feel like I'm in the presence of God in a very special way. I don't know, Joe, do you have any
I
feelings
think
like
God,
that?
in his grace, has revealed that to me really slowly through my decades of walking with him. I think if I knew now what I know about God's holiness, I think I'd have been absolutely terrified at the start. I think over the years, I become more aware of my own sinful heart. And because I'm more aware of my own sinful heart, I become more aware of just how far away I am, and then just how big the cross is. We were talking about it in our Bible study on Friday with women. Okay. Oh, you guys are putting more questions on. Okay. Do we know if anyone actually died from coming into God's presence? There's the two guys who died, because I've just done that bit in Leviticus. The two Aaron's sons who do the wrong thing.
That's
and
right.
They do die. They're like priests, but they haven't done all the right stuff before
Yeah,
they
that's
come in.
right. There's also the bit where the Ark of the Covenant is handled improperly. The guy dies. So there is actually a sense in which the holiness of God bears very life-altering and perhaps life-ending things. Priests, when they would go in once a year, would have little bells on the bottom of their robes so that people could hear them outside moving around and make sure they were okay, and they'd have a cord tied to their foot so that they could drag them out just in case they did die.
Fact check. Sometimes I hear that's true, and sometimes I hear that's not true. Is that real, or is that...
It is as true as when I heard it, which was probably in a sermon years back.
Yeah,
So,
because sometimes I hear that is a thing, and sometimes people tell me
if
that's
it is not a
thing.
thing, I will post a video formally redacting it.
Sorry.
Good point. I have good friends to ask, but
There we
yeah.
go. And I have you, so that's good. Excellent. Okay, right. I actually quite like this question. Did Aaron question his brother when he said, "Yeah, bro, come up the mountain, God wants to chat"? Did Aaron say, "What"?
I really
no
would
idea.
love to be a fly on the wall in that conversation.
We don't know.
Of course, Aaron has a special role too. If Moses is the mediator, Aaron is in fact often Moses' helper and sidekick in ministry. So, yeah.
Okay, well, before you jump off the stage, you're exiting. Okay, I'm a complete finisher. I like getting to the end of the questions. Tom, we got in some interesting stuff there, but give us just a big idea. What do you want us to take away?
God has come down. He's come down to meet with his people, and everything changes as a result of that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.